Life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that tells a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear its music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest loudly roars? I hear the truth it liveth, and though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from when tyrants tremble in their fear and hear their dead knell ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Good afternoon. I'm Darren Knowles from First Mennonite Church. On behalf of David's family, I'd like to welcome you to the celebration of life for David Allen Yost. Listen to these words from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Be still and know that I am God. It's my prayer that this time today will be a refuge and a place of strength for all of us here. And as we gather, I hope that this will be a time to laugh and to cry and grieve and celebrate David's life. In doing that, we're here to also comfort each other in a time of grief. So thank you for being here. Just a note that later in the service we'll have a time of sharing, so perhaps you can start reflecting if there is a memory or an impact that David made on your life. And now David's brother Don will come up.
David Allen Yost was my brother. I'm the oldest and he was the youngest of 4 children. The 7 years between us made it difficult for us to connect during school and college years. But later in our 50s and 60s, we found ways to be more like brothers. We shared the joys and helplessness of being fathers. We encouraged each other in our careers. We joked that compared to our 2 sisters, we were outwitted, outmaneuvered, outnumbered. David was born on August 24, 1957, to Janet Marie Cutrell Yost and Melvin Schmidt Yost. He was born a thriving big baby with a congenital disorder in his left leg. The disorder caused him pain and infections throughout his life. In high school, David was a gymnastics athlete, the star of his school play. He played the tuba in the Gold Sash Band. He graduated from Westminster High School in 1957 and attended Western State College to study music. David married Linda Diaco in 1985. The couple gave birth to 2 children, Melissa and Peter. They founded and grew High Country Lawn Care. Dave and Linda divorced in 1994. After they sold the lawn care business, David worked a year for Swift Transportation as a truck driver, following in the footsteps of his father, Mel, our father, Mel. and for 11 years in the office at Swift, working his way up from scheduler to driver manager. In 1918, he obtained his realtor's license, and during the last years of his life, he enjoyed helping people find and buy homes, a career that fit his skills and passions. David died from health complications on June 11, 2022. Which brings us to this moment in time. We're here to honor and celebrate David's life. So let's start with what I think he recognized as his accomplishments. In a Facebook post on his most recent birthday, Dave wrote, quote, "At the age of 20, I never thought I would own a beautiful modern home, own a car that didn't break down, have 3 dogs, be a realtor, be involved with government as a commissioner, have so many wonderful friends, and be so comfortable with who I am. My life is blessed by all these wonderful friends and family who surround me," end quote. I also heard uncountable times from my brother how proud he was of his children, Melissa and Peter. Like most fathers, David wasn't sure he deserved much credit, but he was in awe of and grateful for the contributions his children are making. He was also proud of his volunteer work with an educational organization called Landmark. He was especially proud of earning the right to lead the introductions to the Landmark Forum and the introductory seminar to the communication program. I myself am proud of some attributes that Dave may not have given himself credit for. I'm proud of his gritty determination not to be limited by his disability. His lawn care business involved walking so many miles that he probably mowed his way from Westminster to Taiwan and back. I'm proud of his commitment to parenting as a team with Linda and her current husband, Bob Nicholson. I know of very few people who can accomplish that kind of cooperation through the end in spite of a divorce. Amen. And I admire my brother for his loyalty to and his hunger for connection with his family. David loved family gatherings. Technically, David was married twice, but the second marriage lasted such a short time that I came to suspect that David got married for the sole purpose of enjoying an extra family reunion. So that's the fun part. But if we're going to be able to honor and cherish my brother's memory now and in the future, we need to recognize that, like all of us, David's gift had a shadow side. If we're going to be able to open our hearts to the pain of our loss and to the love that David offered, we have to acknowledge how he hurt us and how we hurt him. We acknowledge the hurt with the hope that by naming these hurts, we'll be better able to find peace and forgiveness. If not now, then in years to come. So here's my list of some of David's gifts and their shadows. 1, he had the gift of a tender heart. The shadow side of this gift was that David was mystified by conflict and challenged by complexity. I remember the bear hug that he gave me at my wedding. He was 16 years old, but his hug crushed me, almost like he was punishing me for leaving his family. I remembered the puzzled, stunned look on his face when he was confronted by meanness or unkindness, especially when that meanness came from me. I remember how he was challenged to read and understand social cues, how he blundered through the delicacies of decorum, and how he irritated and even hurt us with his seeming insensitivity to the shades of our emotions. 2, David had the gift of a love of serving and coaching others. He generously and joyfully gave his time as a Sunday school teacher, a landmark volunteer, and a neighborhood organizer. He told me about several real estate customers who couldn't quite afford the house of their dreams, so my brother chipped in with a generous discount on his realtor's commission. When he made the bean dip for our last family reunion, the weight of the pots of bean dip sagged the back suspension of his car. To accompany the mountains of bean dip, he purchased enough restaurant-quality chips to feed the 5,000 without any miracle from Jesus. The shadow side of David's love for others was his struggle to love himself. He harbored too much shame, and he had enough secrets, like visits to the hospital and money problems, that some of us had trouble trusting his usually roseate evaluations of his existential condition. 3, my brother had the gift of heroic optimism. The women in our family have what they call a Zoom tea. Over Zoom, the women connect, they tell stories, they support each other for several hours each month. And my crazy brother, in the spirit of healthy competition, suggested that the men in our family have a men's tea. I mean, what a hero. How optimistic to think that we men could summon even a few minutes of quality conversation. The shadow side of his gift of optimism was his struggle to face problems. His inability to face financial realities dogged him for years. I remember only a couple of times in his life when he talked openly with me about one of his health problems, even though it had a big impact on our relationship. I hate eulogies. There's an inherent violence and unfairness in trying to paint a picture of a human being in 10 minutes. Like all eulogists, I cannot hope to capture or even the essence, much less the nuance of my brother. David was a complex person, more so than some of us because of the pain he endured and the secrets he kept. So now, with his body gone, his essence and all his complexities will live in our hearts and our memories. You've heard of some of my thoughts and memories, but you each have your own. We now carry a part of his story, a piece of who he was. In conclusion, dearest friends and family, I charge you to nurture and guard and share your memories and your stories of David so that we can share our memories and by sharing can forgive and we can be forgiven and we can hold and even grow his love for us and our love for him.
Thank you, Don. That was
Truly beautiful. Now we come to the sharing time.
David planned this service and this sharing time. Like there was an order already laid out. And he wanted the heart of this service to be the sharing time, sharing stories about the connections that were so important to him. And so we're going to have a time where we're going to invite you to come up here. And I know that sounds a little daunting, but we are live streaming this, and for people who are watching to be able to hear all of the amazing stories, if you're able to come up and speak into this microphone right here, it'll allow for people to hear. So I know that that might be a little daunting, but during services and times like this, you will not regret coming up and sharing that, and the family, I know, will deeply appreciate hearing those stories, those impacts that David made in your life. So we're going to open the floor up. If you have something to share, you're welcome. If you want to come up, and you can sit up on this front row if someone else is talking, to wait to come up. Thank you.
My name's Melinda, and I'm David's sister. This is my husband.
I'm the husband. Go ahead.
In my mind's eye, maybe I should wait till later. In my mind's eye, in my mind's eye, I see my brother in heaven. He is young, in his 20s. He is vibrant and happy. And beside him is my father. Same age, same grin. They're leaning against cool cars. I don't know what they're called. I think my dad's is a Chevy. He had a 1957 Chevy. So they're leaning there, grinning. And I never thought before how much alike they were. So as I looked at them and they were looking at me, I realized they were laughing at me. I was struggling. I was very angry, for one thing. And I was struggling with what to say here today. I wanted to say something, so I think they were laughing because they had the idea that I should read from my dad's Course in Miracles book. Here are all his notes. So I opened the book to this page. Now they're really laughing. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. Nothing at all has happened but that you have put yourself to sleep and dreamed a dream in which you were alien to yourself and but a part of someone else's dream. The miracle does not waken you. The miracle does not awaken you, but merely shows you who the dreamer is. It teaches you that there is a choice of dreams while you are still asleep, depending on the purpose of your dreaming. Do you wish for dreams of healing or for dreams of death? A dream is like a memory in that it pictures what you want to be shown. An empty storehouse with an open door holds all your shreds of memories and dreams. Yet if you are the dreamer, you perceive this much at least, that you have caused the dream and can accept another dream as well. But for this change in the content of the dream, it must be realized that it is you who dream the dreaming. It is you that dream the dreaming you do not like. It is but an effect that you have caused, and you would not be the cause of this effect. In dreams, murder and attack, you are the victim. In dreams of murder and attack, you are the victim in a dying body slain. But in forgiving dreams, is no one asked to be the victim and the sufferer. These are the happy dreams the miracle exchanges for your own. It does not ask you to make another, only that you see you made the one you would exchange for this. This world is full of miracles. They stand in shining silence next to every dream of pain and suffering, of sin and guilt. They are not the dreams They are the dream's alternative, the choice to be the dreamer, rather than deny the active role in making up the dream. They are the glad effects of taking back the consequence of sickness to its cause. The body is released because the mind acknowledges this is not done to me, but I am doing this. And thus the mind is free to make another choice instead. Beginning here, salvation will proceed to change the course of every step in the descent to separation until all steps have been retraced, the latter gone, and all the dreaming of the world undone. Okay, see, that's why they're laughing at me, because this. You want to share something?
Sure.
Okay.
I have a few notes. So I heard about this event about a week ago that was being planned at our house. And after I heard about it and I heard about the sharing, I couldn't help but starting to think, what would I say? And it took me a while, and then something popped in my mind from when I was a kid. Back in the 40s, I used to listen to the Lone Ranger. And at the end of off those programs, someone would say in the foreground, "Who was that masked man?" So I started using that theme to consider who was David Yost to me. And there certainly were things that Don talked about that could be events and circumstances and personalities and all that. But I really tried to boil it down. So here's what I came up with. And that was really something about David. These are things about David that I admired totally and appreciated. First of all, he was a man of humor. I think we know that. We don't have to say much about it. He laughed all the time. And then there's another one laughing right there. Secondly, he was really based in possibility. In my own time with David for the past 20 or so years, he changed jobs. It was always about a future possibility. So nothing stopped him. He just went for it, and I really, truly appreciated that. Again, something that Don mentioned, he was a man to me of no excuses. His physical condition, I can imagine doing what he did. In those 20-something years, I never heard him use one excuse because of his leg. Not one. Then the most important thing, I think, for you two to know is that he was a father and a dad more than anything. He was so proud of you two, totally proud of you two. He loved you to death. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Christine Frances Yost Lundberg. People called me Christy when I was growing up here in Denver. Some people, like my Uncle John, still call me Christy. I changed my name to Chris when I went to Goshen College and moved away. That's what my husband Don calls me, and most other people in my family now. But my brother Dave called me Kiki. He was the only one. He probably started calling me that when he started talking, and I was about 7. This last time was about a month ago when we spoke on the phone. I have no special name for him, but we had a special relationship. The last time we spoke, about a month ago, I talked about his plans to improve his health and fitness and financial status, and he was possibility of all of those things. He was optimistic, even though it's been a struggle in the past few years, and more of a struggle as the years go by. I think David talked to me more about his health because I'm a nurse, but I had to tread a fine line because I had a big sister listening, encouraging mode, and avoided the I know better mother mode, which he found very annoying. And I've been working on dropping that altogether, but I've not succeeded at all times. He spoke of his corgis, Lizzie and Annie. Are they up there? No. There's Walter. And Walter, who he'd given to Melissa, and he was so proud of them and so happy to tell me all about their exploits. He was quite the dog grandpa. And I agree, his kids were always the top. I only wish that I could be as positive about my kids as he was about your kids. I forgot, one of them's here. No, she said you are, so. So we were talking on the phone. I'm sure we laughed because we always laugh. And sometimes we laugh a lot. Then we said goodbye. Talk to you soon, and perhaps, I hope, I love you. So he called me, I don't know, June 5th, and I was in the middle of, I was at a concert, and my phone was buzzing, and he called me twice, and I turned my phone off because it was quiet in the concert, and I called him back, and he never called me back, and so that was the last time we spoke, and I have some sad feelings about that. We were alike in so many ways, our toothy grins, our crow's feet, our love of laughter. I think we looked more alike than we looked like either of our parents or our siblings. We both had loved attention, and we wouldn't admit it, that we did. There are many ways that we grew apart and were different. I moved to Indiana, stayed there for 50 years. I took care of myself, ate lots of veggies, drank lots of water. David thought that a lot of water was a quart a day, and he was working on more. He had a few other bad habits. I graduated from college. I'm still married to my first husband. I had an easy life. David was troubled with money, health problems, and that had serious problems that had serious consequences. I spent many years thinking we couldn't connect. We were too different, and blaming it on our different lifestyles. And he didn't make it easy on me sometimes. We were both a little stubborn. But about 20 years ago, when I did the Landmark Forum, a program that David hounded me about, I saw how arrogant I'd become, and was so thankful for him for not giving up on his big sister. He must have called me 10 times to get it scheduled and to find out what I wanted to get out of the Landmark Forum, which was to get my office cleaned up. Those of you, if you might have done the Landmark Forum, that's kind of ridiculous. But that just shows you the stand he was for me and what he saw in me that I didn't know. So I want to thank my little brother for giving me someone like him to love and to accept. I want to thank him for putting up with my bossiness and arrogance and seeing the real person behind that mask. Thanks for the big part that he played. I want to thank him for the big part that he played in giving the world his fabulous daughter Melissa and his son Peter. They are so special to me. Thank you, David, for teaching me how to find a way to connect when it doesn't seem possible. Thank you for grace, for love, and for the memories I have of you and your crazy, amazing ride. I'll love you always, Kiki.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joanna. I'm Chris's daughter and David's niece. And I didn't really prepare anything to say and had a long flight. But I will say I was really lucky because I think I got to see David the most at family reunions when he was probably the most happy. And one of my favorite things to do with David at these reunions was definitely to play games. Cornhole, euchre, whatever. And when David was playing games, it was a fantastic intertwining of happiness and misery like you've never seen. And I just had so much fun with him. It didn't matter if I was on his team or on the opposite team, if we were winning, if we were losing. I just will never forget his laugh and the sound of that laugh and the joy he brought to me and to so many. And I'll miss you, David. I miss you. I love you.
I'm Bob Yost, David's cousin. I don't have any prepared stuff, but I can talk a long time, so I was told before I come up here. My sister Cheryl, Carol, my wife Karen are here. I have regrets. The regrets I have are that there was a period in my life, our life, that was foundational to who I am, and that was the years we grew up together. I shared with Donnie just a couple days ago that what happened from when we all went to college until now. I've missed those connections so much. And it's Christy. I didn't call it the other, but Christy's still Christy, and that's still Donnie. And he calls me Bobby, and that's okay. There's a few people I allow to do that, and you're one of them. Or all of you could, I don't care. But most recently, our parents died about, 4 years ago? And I inherited about a semi-load of videotapes, audio tapes, slides from Eldon. You remember? Oh my gosh. I finally got a machine that would kind of put them all in a digital format, but we did put it in a digital format. And just recently we were watching all these videos of our Christmases and the times that Grandpa and Grandma's on the Yost side, just religiously, every Christmas Eve, we had that, and David's in the middle of it. Just what I always wanted. Didn't matter what it was, even when he got the gift for somebody else and he opened it, it was just what he always wanted. Always. I share a lot of memories of going upstairs and our cousin Phyllis telling us ghost stories in the bedroom, trying to scare us to death, and then we had to go down and celebrate. David's right in the middle of it. So I was fortunate here just a few years ago. I don't do Facebook, but somebody said that David had a post on Facebook that said that he was looking for some place to go for Thanksgiving. He had no place to go that year. Wow, so we connected, and he came to our house for Thanksgiving. We enjoyed a great time together. It was kind of a reunion type thing, and I stayed a little bit in touch with him after that. Recently, in a business dealing, I was doing some work in Commerce City, and I had to get it's a long story on that side, but it ended up being that we had some stuff before the Planning Commission, and I found out that David was an alternate. So we went through a process, because he was going to be on there, but he was my cousin, and we had to get through, was there any conflict of interest and all that kind of stuff. And was kind of fun. But he did support us in that deal, and I got to connect with him again, and so that was a blessing. But I would just say that, family is majorly important. Even what happened to 50 years, in between us, I don't know. Linda, you live right over here in Boulder, and I don't come to your house. I have never been there. I'm going like, why? So I'm gonna solve that, and we're gonna make sure that we reconnect that. So I can just say that David was, for me, it's all the memories of our childhood, and then we have this massive gulf, and then a reuniting. I was just so blessed to be able to see him again and to talk to him, and he shared some of the pains that he had, and of course I knew very well about his leg issue and all that, but I never heard him complain once about it either, even when we were growing. I never once. I never can remember that at all. So I just wanted to say something to let you know that we're still here and you're still family, and I wish I'd been able to meet you two before today, but just that brick, that foundation of my life is never going to go away, and you're all part of it, and David was a big part of it, so thank you.
It's all dim up here. So I'm Ben, David's nephew, Don's son. I'm using borrowed reading glasses here, so see how, this is for my mom. Dear Dave, as we gather to celebrate your life, I would like to add a few words of appreciation and admiration. This is Elaine, by the way. 1, I admire you for making the tuba your instrument of choice. It takes an imaginative soul to appreciate the tuba and persistence and patience to play that huge chunk of metal. And picking it up again at age 64, that rocks. 2, thank you for commiserating with me about the joys and tribulations of being the youngest. We could always assure each other that despite our siblings' assertions, we were not spoiled. 3, thanks for instigating a family Zoom session last Christmas when all of our immediate family were in San Francisco and you were in Denver. You were so clearly interested in everyone's life, asking thoughtful questions and getting even sometimes shy Janet to talk and laugh. You delighted Nadia by laughing long and heartily, saying, at her, this is handwritten. So, you delighted Nadia by laughing long and heartily at her knock-knock jokes. And I'll say, when I told Nadia, she's 6, my daughter, that David died, she said, well, don't take this the wrong way, Daddy, but I kind of blame you for not letting me know Dave more, because he really laughed at my knock-knock jokes. She really, that made a big impression on her. That was just one example of how you put intention and energy into strengthening connections. And speaking of forgiveness, I want to apologize for putting you, Moe, and Peter in a rather damp and chilly basement to sleep when you visited Goshen. I don't know where that was. Was that 724? Yeah, that place. Spider webs. It was. Oh, you did? Great. In the morning, you came up with a slight bend in your back that had not been there the night before, shivering, but with a smile on your face and a cheery good morning. I think you even bought us a toaster that trip, which we still use. Many have remarked on your ability to maintain a positive spirit while experiencing years of pain, but only of those of us who have experienced even brief periods of debilitating pain truly understand the amount of courage and strength and character it takes to function with good humor. Often hurting, never knowing what your body would throw at you next, you committed to helping others and passionately and hopefully engaged with life. For that, you are my hero. I know the celestial orchestra sounds even more melodious with the addition of you and your tuba, but we will all sorely miss you. So I'll just say a few things for myself. I remember I don't know how old he was, 18 when I was first remembered hanging out with him, but he was just the epitome of cool. So he had a Camaro, a 3 on the tree, as they called it. It was a 3-speed. I think it was a Camaro. Do you remember? I'm pretty sure, which was cool. My grandma would give me a quarter at the grocery store to play video games, arcade game. My Uncle DeLoss would give me $1, which was great. Put the dollar, get the quarters. Dave would give me $5. And I also remember going with Dave and Linda to Elitch's, which is an amusement park, and having it was just like the coolest thing ever. And I was so happy. And then, I don't know if it was that night or some other night, I got to spend the night at their house and watch, I think it was Alien. And I was like maybe 9 years old, or I don't know, way too young for Alien, but I thought it was awesome. And I also remember being kind of jealous when Linda got pregnant with Melissa, because I thought, well, this is a new, this isn't gonna be the case anymore. But yeah, I just think when I was in my 20s, like I would not have had the time for a little 9-year-old kid to invite him over to my house. So I just really appreciate that about him.
I'm Casey. I'm Dave's nephew. My dad is Don. Being the youngest, one of the younger cousins, and living further away, I don't have a lot of memories of Uncle Dave when I was young. And I think we connected a lot more in our later years. And he would call me a lot. And I think one way that the way we connected is through laughter. I use laughter as a connection mechanism, as a coping mechanism, for joy, for sadness. And my Uncle Dave just would laugh and laugh. I think half of our phone calls were just us laughing together. And so, as my life continues and he lives on in our hearts, I will always hear his laugh, that loud, hearty laugh. And I will carry that with me forever. And I just really appreciate that about him, and I will miss him very much.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Yost. I'm Melinda's daughter, David's niece. I had the good fortune of living in Colorado with David, so I got to spend a lot of time with him growing up. He was very cool. I just remember thinking I remember being about 5, and we would go to my grandparents' house, Mel and Jan, for barbecue or something, like barbecues or birthdays. And he'd always be there, and he just always made me feel so special, He just made me feel like I was, and I know he did that with all of us, I think. He just had a way of, when he laughed, I felt like I was the funniest person in the world, because his laugh was so infectious. And he listened so keenly, and he really cared about what I had to say, even, as a small child. And as I grew up, my first real job was at Landmark, and I had the good fortune of being able to work with David multiple times a week. Like, I would see him, we talk on the phone. I mean, I got to spend a lot of time with him. And, I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about him is his commitment to making a difference for other people. He has a huge heart, had a huge heart, still does. And really contributed, really put, I think, his best energy towards contributing to other people. He would and he delighted in it, and he got energy from it, and he really made a difference for a lot of people. You know, everybody he talked to, he would make a difference for in some way, and I really appreciate that about him. And then the other thing is, I have a little girl. Her name is Ananda. She's 7 now, and when she was first born, he came. There was a picture in that screen of him holding her, and he was so delighted that she was born. Like, he just had so much delight in this little creature, you know, and he held her, and he got teary, and he just fell in love with her. And when we came back out to visit, he would always kind of make time for her, just like he had for me. It was just like, you know, the same thing. And he bought her a little corgi stuffed animal. Actually, 2 corgis, and all these corgi books, which we have at our house. But she sleeps with that corgi every night, and she calls it Lizzie. She just loves that corgi. And when I told her that David had passed, she said, "Is that the one who gave me the corgi?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "That's very sad." You know, she connected with him even though she was still so very young. He had such a good way with kids. He was so good with kids. So that's what I wanted to say. I love you, David.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Holdeman, and I grew up with David in this church. My family shares an aunt and uncle with Dave's family, Paul Holdeman and Helen. And I'm going to read something from my brother, Bruce, who lives in West Virginia now, so he wanted me to relate this story about Dave as a young adult. Maybe Melissa and Peter will appreciate this. So from Bruce. Late 70s and 80s, David and I saw a lot of each other. I lived part of that time with my Uncle Paul and Aunt Helen's house in Loveland while I was attending CSU, and David spent periods of time living at that house too. It has been noted David played the tuba, but one has a different perspective when you live with someone who practices the tuba. I often wondered why David chose the tuba over all else. It wasn't like you would ever hear a snappy tuba riff and be inspired to pick it up. I was an aspiring guitar player. My cousin Mark played the banjo. I would always hear something that I wish I could learn to play, not so much with the tuba. There is a reason why the sound of the tuba is summed up in 2 words, oompa and blat. Nevertheless, I would spend afternoons struggling with my engineering studies, hearing oompa, 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 subconsciously trying to guess the bass line fits what song. Running upstairs for a break and seeing my cousin Pris, we greeted each other with clenched grins and laughing. Around that time, David and I shared many near-death experiences working at Diamond Insulation, a factory job with dangerous heavy equipment, poor air quality, climbing high ladders to check chemical bins, dust blowouts, pneumatic hose blowouts, the place to work only when one could not find any other job. David was driving his little white MG then. He and I always had a humorous take on our pathetic jobs and pathetic lives. I remember a time when David was driving a forklift truck across this flimsy steel ramp between 2 loading docks. If you just got off a little center, the ramp would radically tilt, almost dumping the forklift 5 feet down to the pavement. Of course, that was the situation David got himself into. With the forklift bobbing precariously on the ramp off to one side, we were all yelling at Dave to jump. Jump, David, jump. Instead, for jumping off the high side of the forklift, David jumped down to the ground, landing directly below the bobbing forklift. We all immediately started yelling, "Run, David, run!" We had to get another forklift to right the situation. Again, clinched grins and laughing. And then there was the time when David started his lawn business. He called me up to ask if he could give me a price on lawn service. I told him I didn't have much of a lawn, but sure. I was living at our Lakewood house that Ivan built. Ivan's my father. The house was built on the side of a hill, and the front lawn was literally 15 feet square. There was a side lawn on the other side, and the house did have a backyard, but it was out of sight of the front lawn. David arrived, and I showed him the front lawn. "That's it?" he said, laughing. I told him that I said it wasn't much of a lawn, and I expected his best buddy rate. "I miss laughing with you, David." And I miss laughing with him too. We would take our dogs to the dog park. So I will miss him very much.
I'm Bonnie Holdeman-Dalkey. I'm Cynthia's cousin as well as Dave's. I'm the daughter of the Paul and Helen that provided dormitory space. Just a few days after we found out that David had made his transition to non-physical, I was, you'll be able to figure this out because I was doing a full moon meditation with a group that I do. I meditate with them every month on the full moon. They're in Iceland. And oftentimes, believing that time doesn't have to be as linear as we think it is, I just do it whenever I want to and say, "I'm with you." But on that day, I was right on time and feeling really connected, and it was a really rich time. And here, I had said when I interacted on Facebook with David's family that I knew what it's like to lose a brother, that even though I feel like I'm in touch with him, I miss his hugs. Well, right in the middle of this meditation, my brother Mark shows up and hugs me so beautifully that I could actually feel it physically. And over his shoulder, I could see David grinning and saying, "I've been trying to get the cousins together, and now they're going to do it."
Hi, my name's Rosalie Otto. I am not family. I am a friend of David's from a long time ago. He was a groomsman at our wedding. And I can tell you, he had the tuba at that time too. My husband and his brother, John and Daryl Otto, lived with Dave. And we'd come home, and what was going on? Dave was playing the tuba. I do remember his laugh was so wonderful, so incredible. Wasn't in touch with him for a long, long time, but I remember him very well. You were lucky that Dave was related to you, that you knew him. God bless you, Dave.
I'm Mike Dahlke. I'm Dave's cousin-in-law. And a number of things have come to mind just listening to other, like, for instance, why David played the tuba. Well, I played the French horn in the Gold Sash Band a little before David's time. I'm contemporary with Don, who played clarinet. But I'm thinking that, I don't know in David's case, but I played French horn because Jack Stevens, the director, pushed me in that direction. I wanted to play trumpet, but I think he had a list, and he went, I already got 6 trumpets I need. And so he said, better if you played the French horn. So I think he probably needed a tuba, and that's how David ended up with it. The one memory that came to mind when I was thinking about David, among a number of memories, but back in the summer of 1975, Chris and Don were living with us in Grandma Cutrell's house for the summer, and we were doing some backpacking that summer. We did some weekend backpacking trips, but then toward the end of the summer, we did a long, almost a week-long backpacking trip in the Weminuche Wilderness area down in southwest Colorado, and David came with us on that trip. We ended up at a point fairly early on, I think it was the second or third day, where Bonnie wasn't feeling real well, so Bonnie and I decided to lay out a day, and so Chris and Don and Dave pressed on, and we'd come up with a kind of a general plan of where if it worked out, where we might meet up later on in the trip. I don't want to get too many details there, but ended up that didn't work out. And so here, after being in the wilderness for 5 or 6 days, 6 days I think it was, the 6th day, Bonnie and I pushed really hard to get out of the, and get to the, what was the name of that campground? It's the, anyway. We started at one end, and it wasn't exactly a loop. We left the car, we were going to end up at this other campground, we're going to have to figure out a way to get the car. But we thought we would find them, we'd find Chris and Don and Dave there. We showed up at this campground, they're not there. So we're setting up camp. We're thinking, we got to spend another night here in our tent. And we're starting to set it up, and all of a sudden I hear this scream, and here comes David flying through the campground. They were thinking the same thing. They had gotten there earlier in the day. They were not that far ahead of us. And they were also expected to see us at this campground, and they didn't see us, and so they were also setting up camp and thinking they had to spend another night in the tent. Then David saw, and it was just, everybody in that campground probably thought we were crazy, because we were running like David running through the campground, hollering, grabbing Bonnie and giving her a big hug, because now we could go to town and get a motel room and take a bath.
Hi, my name's Mariella. I'm not used to talking with a microphone. David and I dated for a while, about 20-some years ago, back when my son Nathan and Melissa and Peter were teenagers, and they grew really close together. So there are a couple of memories that I remembered that I thought I would share. I started to write them down, or I wrote them down, and I thought, well, maybe I'd share them with everybody. And you can tell it's been a few years, because now I need readers. But I remember one summer when David and I took all 3 of the kids to visit my grandmother's ranch in Nebraska. And we wanted to go to Nebraska because and they really wanted to go after I explained that Lake McConaughey was just like right down the road, and everybody wanted to go play in the lake. So we rented jet skis for the kids. I think we rented 2 of them, which meant that somebody had to double up. And I think, I don't know if we were with Peter or anyway, Melissa and Nathan took off, well, Melissa took off on this jet ski, driving like a total maniac. She probably wasn't even old enough to have a driver's license, I don't know for sure. And she just peeled out, and then she dumped the whole thing, and it kills the engine and whatever, and then you have to flip it back over. But they came back, and Melissa is like hiding behind Nathan. And I kept saying to Nathan, where's your glasses? Where are those new glasses we just got last week, from Pearl Vision Center? And he's like, I lost them in the lake, because Melissa had dumped the jet ski. So she was, she used Nathan as a human shield at that time. But that wasn't the only thing that happened at the lake, because David was the one driving my 4x4, and the lake was low at the time, and he wanted to drive like as far down to the water as you could get. And then I don't know if you've ever done that by a lake, but the sand pretty much turns into quicksand. And we got like stuck, like major stuck, and it was embarrassing. I had to call this local tow truck guy to come and tow us out. So that was when we first got there, right? We have the debacle with the jet skis, and then David managed to get us stuck again, twice, and I had to pay for 2 tow trucks, a set of prescription glasses, and the trip turned out to be a little more expensive than I thought. So, I also remember one time and it was the first and only time I've done this, I don't know if you guys remember, that we decided we were going to have a murder mystery party for Mel and Jan, their grandparents, and the kids were like so into it. They went with me to the store to plan the menu and go shopping, and then they're like, well, what about costumes? We have to wear costumes, because they wanted to get into character and whatnot. So we ended up going to Goodwill and purchasing everything for our costumes, and that was the most fun murder mystery party. So I'll have to do that again sometime. I highly recommend it, especially if you go all out and get costumes. There was another time during that probably period that I hired David as a network consultant for my company. And one night I had given him access to the offices overnight, because he was to take down one server and then install another server. So he had, carte blanche to all of the offices and everything. And after he was done, I guess what he did was he peppered the company suggestion box, but he ghost wrote everything like for all of my employees, because he'd come to know them. So, we wrote all of these company suggestions, and then he'd say comments like, that computer guy works really hard. He deserves a bonus. And even decorating suggestions like, don't you think you should get rid of that couch? And it took me even, a little while to go like, why did we get all of these suggestions all at one time? And, oh yeah, it was the night David was spent overnight at the office, filling the company suggestion box with anonymous notes. So David loved to laugh. He loved his kids. He loved his dogs. And we actually reconnected like a year and a half or so ago. We got together a couple of times for breakfast just to talk about our kids and just laugh at all of the things that have happened to both of us in the last 20 years. So he always had a sense of humor, and he could always make light of pretty much any situation, or at least as we told it, we could get each other laughing. I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from David, and I think Melissa said it in her post on Facebook too, that never not take an opportunity to tell someone that you love them, because you don't know when it's going to be the last time. And I'm so happy to see the two of you again. And if you're up for adoption, I'll still adopt you.
I'm Leland. Joanna is my partner, and she's David's niece. And I definitely wasn't planning on saying anything, but when I, past couple of weeks, I was, reminiscing about our David and I's short relationship. I probably knew him the shortest amount of time in this room, but he was really sweet, and he left such a impression on me. And there was a story. I wasn't going to say anything, but I remember this incident. It wasn't really a story. There's a story. I think that the first time I met him was also maybe the first time I met most of the Lundbergs and Yosts, and that was at Joanna's brother's wedding, like 4 years ago, right? And I was meeting a lot of new people, and I think the wedding ceremony was about to begin, and he was outside taking a smoke break. So he was alone, and I was kind of like taking some personal space, and so we kind of started chatting, and he just looked at me and he said, this is pretty weird for you, right? And I was like, yeah. And I don't know, it kind of relaxed me, and I felt acknowledged and seen. And, most of our interactions have been in the private, personal time moments, and I could always rely on him to talk to, at the end. Guys, I've been thinking about you a lot. I lost my dad, and and it's really hard, and it sucks, and there's nothing you could really say about it, and if you ever want to talk or anything, just I'm here. Thanks.
So Yoster, that's who he was for me. Man, the ruckus you've caused, Yoster. I had the privilege of meeting David 15 years ago, thereabouts, at Landmark. And I'll never forget, because the first time we met, it was after an event that we were volunteering with. And basically, he just starts right in. He's like, your leadership group, this is what they need, Here we are, both in leadership groups volunteering, but David's got something to say about my leadership group to give me a hard time about it. A few years later, we end up being buddies in my leadership group, which was always David's thing, right? Like, he'd become coachable at some point, right? And a few years after that, he was working for Swift, and he said, hey, I've got this extra time, and I'd love to try my hand at something else. And I said, well, David, I'm getting busy enough in real estate that I'd love to see about having you do some admin, because, it sounds like you manage pretty big operations and pretty big things. And he's like, yeah, let's give that a shot. And I said, great. So, we're maybe 2 weeks into this thing, and this speaks to how passionate he was going, whatever direction he was going. He says, hey, I'm loving this thing. I want to become a realtor. Well, all right, David. Well, let's do that, right? So 2 weeks in, and I said, and it's going to be perfect because you're going to have full-time Swift. You're going to have that income coming in from there, and then you can ease your way into the real estate deal, right? It must have been 2 weeks after that. He calls me up and he said, hey, I got great news. I'm really going to be able to focus in on this real estate gig. And I said, oh, yeah, why is that, David? Oh, I quit Swift. I said, David, oh, my God, are you serious? And he laughs, his big laugh, right? Like, oh, it's all going to be fine, Omac is, forever the optimist, forever the possibility. And so we had the privilege of working together, inside the real estate world, and he just went passionately wherever he went. And Yoster, you left your mark. You've left life brighter than it was, more colorful than it was before you were here. And obviously, we all love to still have you here, but you know what? You left the mark. And the thousands and thousands of lives impacted inside of his contributions with Landmark, his contributions to his family's kids. And I miss him every day. And, you know, he had me, the last conversation we had, he was talking about how he was getting a new manager in his real estate group and how excited he was about that because he kind of butted head with the last gal. And I said, "Oh, yeah, Yost, that's not a new story, is it?" He just laughed and said, "Oh, you know me so well, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I know a little bit about you, Yoster. But thank you for your contribution, David, and we miss you, but you can hear and see from everything here that you left your mark, buddy. So thank you."
My name is Dan Arrow, and how I knew David was he was a participant at Landmark in seminars that I led in the 1980s. And one thing I remember about David is somewhere in the seminar, he would raise his hand. And at first it seemed like he had such a simple and kind of shallow question. And we would engage in a conversation. And as we were engaged in that conversation, I could see his passion for not so much figuring out things, but his passion for the inquiry. How do I make life work? Who am I? And then at some point in the conversation, he would just start laughing. And it was just a pleasure to see him. And the result was what at first seemed to be a kind of a shallow, silly question turned out to be the question that lifted the whole room and made the conversation deeper and more important to all of us. About, 30 years later, I happened to be in another seminar. I wasn't leading it, but I was in the room. And David was in the room as a participant. And up went his hand. And he asked what seemed to be a simple question. And the seminar leader and he started going. And I'm in the back of the room thinking, isn't that the same question he asked 30 years ago? It might have been. But it was the same person. It was David. And he made the same contribution. And I started concluding that he asked questions, maybe not so much to get the answers, but his passion for the inquiry, and maybe just to challenge us, maybe to annoy us. I'm not sure. But there was a time when we were volunteering together, and we were in the side of a room, and he was talking to me, and he said, "You know why I come here?" And I said, "Why, David?" He said, "I'm really known here, and my contributions are accepted. It's not the only place, but it's such a place of refuge. It's a place where I can create my life, invent who I am, and go back out into the world and share it with everybody else." So, David, I want you to know that you were known, you were appreciated, your contributions were accepted and cherished, and I thank you for your life. You did a great job.
afternoon, everyone. I wasn't going to say anything, but I just love David. He was the biggest love. His heart was so warm. He was so generous. My name is Stephanie. I go to church here, but I knew him from Landmark, and I was surprised when I came here and I saw him. I was like, whoa, what are you doing here? And I was in the communication courses with him, and they're not any courses. I mean, they're pretty amazingly intense for 2 years, traveling around the country, and the whole thing is about creating possibilities. For the world, and just a deep commitment he had for everyone who walked into any of our courses. I mean, I'm telling you, Landmark is crazy. You're there until like 10, 12 o'clock at night doing all these things, but all of it, he just came with such love and such dedication and like commitment that all of these people, every single one of them, have great lives. And he did that for me. And because he was, he had been in these courses longer than I had, and he just had such wisdom, such patience. He laughed a lot, but he listened so deeply. And then I had my kid here, and he met Micah, and he was like what you guys were saying. He's just delighted in children, and he looked at my little guy and was just like, wow. And I just knew that love was so deep and so profound, and that we had this shared time. He called me like a week. I saw him at church like a couple weeks before he was gone, and he had asked me to go to the conference with them, and I didn't talk to him about it, and I feel so bad that I didn't get to talk to him one last time. But anyway, I just want to say it's awesome that you're all here. He talked about his family. He talked about how much he loved all of you. He talked about his nieces, the pictures that he put on Facebook with the baby. I don't even know whose baby that was, but it was so beautiful. And I was just like, he loved the family, and I think that he would just be so delighted that all of you are coming here, and whatever happened, we never heard about any kind of problems because we're talking about possibilities. And he just, I think that he would be so delighted to hear your family coming back together, and whatever happened, that he's creating the possibility of family in every moment. So thank you, David, for all your love.
I don't want to cut anybody off, but I felt like I can tell you, I believe David is loving this. Hearing all of that is fantastic. Thank you to everybody that shared. It was wonderful and meaningful. And now I think we're going to hear from the Beatitudes from Linda and Chris.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Where am I here? Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Thus they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
So the family has picked a couple of hymns for us to sing this afternoon. The first one is My Life Flows On. We are going to be projecting the music, notes, words, and everything up here so that we can put this into the live stream. I thought I'd done something wrong. And in hearing these stories, I'm trying to envision David playing that thing and carrying the bass line for us. So I would invite you to stand and try to envision the bass line with a tuba.
Listening to these stories, I can't help but borrow the phrase from the Hebrew Bible that we are standing on holy ground to hear the ways, the connections of David's life. I thank you all for doing that and know that there will be more sharing afterwards. I'll try and offer a brief bit of perspective. At times of grief and loss, we confront lots of the fundamental questions about what it means to be human. They can be phrased lots of different ways, but they often boil down to what kind of world do we live in, and what is the final word? Those questions have not changed in the history of humanity. The fears and hopes of the people that Jesus speaks to on a mountain 2,000 years ago in the Beatitudes from Matthew 5 are the same fears and hopes we carry with us today. We sometimes distract ourselves, make ourselves so busy we can avoid the bigger questions, but eventually they bubble up in such times of mourning. The Beatitudes are the core of Jesus' message and one of the most transformational religious texts ever to be written down. It does not take long to look around the world and be almost overwhelmed by destruction, disease, and death. And perhaps we wonder why risk attachments, why risk those deep feelings when it seems as if we're guaranteed nothing but pain? How can we not become cynical and jaded or close ourselves off to human emotions? So in the passage from Matthew 5, Jesus speaks to people who are in pain and suffering and says to look deeper. That God is with those in pain. That God is with those that are poor in spirit, the mourning, the peacemakers. That there is a deeper reality. Not by avoiding grief or denying it. Jesus encourages us not to turn away. Each loss of a loved one is unique and difficult in its own way. The sudden loss of David, in many ways, leaves a special mark of grief, made easier by the obvious deep love of friends and family. We've heard many times today talking about wishing for one more conversation, one more time together. Jesus doesn't ask us not to mourn. Mourning is part of what it means to be human. It's part of this life that we will make connections and that we will lose physically those that we love. But in the Beatitudes, we hear a promise of comfort, wiping tears from the brokenhearted. And I don't believe that we're talking about it in the abstract, but rather I believe that that comfort, the comfort of God, comes from those sitting shoulder to shoulder with us right now. The hugs, the cards, the text messages, the little gestures that connect us and comfort us. This is the work of God. Those very connections, those very relationships, stories, and memories lead us not only towards grief, but also through grief. The pain and sadness of David's loss are there because of the love and the connection and the memory of all the stories we heard up here, those connections to David. The grief is deep because David showed deep love and was deeply loved. One of the unique messages that we hear in the Beatitudes and through the gospel stories is that God inhabits humanity. This term on incarnation, the Word made flesh, as the Gospel of John puts it. David was connected to the divine. It's natural to mourn that loss, and just as natural to know that that divine spark lives on. Each of the stories we hear is a connection. I think of them as little vines, little green vines, shoots of God's connection, God's community, reaching out, connecting us, nourishing us, comforting us. During these times, we brush up against the eternal and the unexplainable. But I believe in the divine spark that is in each human being, the Spirit of God that animates all people. And I believe that the final word of God's creation is love. At times like this, we stand on the precipice of a great mystery. And what form our hope takes in eternity is less important than the reality it brings right now. I'm touched by the laughter and the tears of this service. And of course, those two things are not conflicting, but complementary. You know, David, as I mentioned, he designed this service, and he left us a gift. He picked the music, the order of worship, but he also picked this passage in Matthew 5. And David's faith is speaking through this passage to us about his belief and his vision for the world. His hope that echoed Jesus' hope, that those of us that sit here and those of us outside of these walls that mourn, that are downtrodden, oppressed, those that are meek, those that are trying to make peace, that God hears us. God lifts us up and gives us comfort, sometimes despite all the evidence to the contrary. The hope and love of Jesus are deeply subversive in our culture. We're too often conditioned to trust only material, tangible, and quantifiable things. But to gather and acknowledge the deep connections that have been shared and to affirm hope is a part of what I believe is good news. The hope of enduring love means that there are no ordinary days. We are surrounded by gift after gift. What we consider the little things in our lives are messages of God's love to us. Perhaps for us it's taking a walk, working in the garden, or in David's case, we see it up here, the tuba, corgis. These are ways that God's love comes to us. The power of the Beatitudes comes from proclaiming that God remembers those that the world forgets. That power is amplified by the fact that later in the story we see Jesus facing death, feeling abandoned, and the fear and the grief that come with that. This is a great mystery, that the divine spark in that God faces the existential crisis and anxiety that confronts us all, but that there is hope beyond. In our tears and in our brokenness, in our thankfulness for David's life and work, in the grief of missing him, may God's grace bring comfort. May God's Spirit give hope. Amen.
So the other hymn that Dave picked was Come We That Love the Lord. This is a very, very traditional hymn. We cannot sing this one sitting down. I please invite you to stand up. And remember that singing is whatever comes out of your mouth. It does not have to be correct. Let this one rip.
Love the Lord and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord. And thus around the throne, and thus around the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Zion yield 1,000 sacred sweets before we reach the heavenly field. Before we reach the heavenly field, walk the golden streets, or walk the golden streets. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Songs about and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. Fairer worlds on high to fairer worlds on high. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God.
It has been good to be here. It is good to be together. You all are invited after we dismiss to a reception out there. I'm going to offer a prayer of benediction and release, And then we're going to dismiss the family to go on out. And then at that point, once they're out, I will dismiss you all to go out there. So take this dismissal prayer with you. Eternal strength, hold us. Eternal hope, show us life. Eternal compassion, comfort us in our grief. Eternal goodness, grant us your grace. As we live, work, and pray in this place and in this time, and with these people who reveal your love. Amen.